This is the story of a single moment in the middle of a storm, a moment where lives cross like ships in a dark sea, where choices are made that will be counted for generations. It is a story of love and duty, of quiet courage and terrible tumult, of a single face in a crowd, and of the thousands of footsteps that will not be heard again. It is not an easy tale. It moves from the hush of a lamplit bankroom in London to the blood-hot streets of Paris, from a small family's domestic tenderness to the public furnace of revolution. But listen, let the voice in your ear be steady. I will carry you from one place to another, and I will not spare the truth. The stakes are lives, one life we follow closely, the lives of the people around him, and the life of a man who will make the most terrible decision, not for himself, but for another. Picture for a moment a tiny, time-worn banking office by Temple Bar. A sober old gentleman sits by a small fire. His name is Jarvis Lorry. He is a man of daily habits, ledgers, signatures, custodial duty. To the outer eye, his life is small and plain. To those who know him, it is steady and true. Tellson's Bank is his world and his charge. Tonight his mind is heavier than usual. He has come from Dover and the near sea air. A letter sits in his hand. Its writing is familiar to him, a prisoner's hand, a desperate hand. The letter calls for help. It names a man who in the old order of things would be a noble, Gay Bell. It asks, in an old-fashioned, polite phrase, for mercy. It says simply, I am Gay Bell. I am in the Abbey. I was once a man who did his best for those beneath him. Save me. Mr. Lorry reads with a banker's caution and a friend's alarm, and then he is on his feet. He cannot rest. He is a man of action in a man's world of business, and it drives him into motion. He will set a journey in motion. That night, a carriage rumbles out into fog and road. Across the channel, a decision has been made in another life. Charles Darnay, a gentle teacher and translator who once carried an old family title, has taken a route nobody expected. He crosses a country the color of ash and heading toward Paris. He has gone to answer a letter from an imprisoned man. He has gone in the hope of saving an innocent civil servant. He has gone despite the cost. He does not yet know how great that cost will be. The path into revolution is not a single straight road. It is a knotted tangle, grain and hunger, centuries of small cruelties, law that favored a few, priests and nobles who took more than they needed. Those injustices ripened into rage, and rage into orders and decrees that fed on themselves. A blade called by the people a necessary instrument, la guillotine, became both symbol and tool. It came into the world slowly, and then in a rush. A machine shaped from the mechanics of fear and the hunger for justice turned to vengeance. Meanwhile, in a quiet part of London, there is a house in Soho where Dr. Alexander Manette, a man with the memory of a prison on his brow, lives with his daughter, Lucie, and her small child. They are not wealthy, but they are rich in their small, private world of love and care. When the news arrives that Charles has been arrested in Paris, that letter's single line, "For love of justice, for the honor of our name, I come," falls in Lucie's hands like a blade and a benediction at once. She believes. She has always believed in him. She reads and rereads that note. The father who had been broken by a long confinement, who had once made shoes in a prison garret and learned the slow, weary craft of keeping hands busy while the mind strained. This same doctor now draws new courage from his own suffering. He moves through the terrifying city with a physician's calm and a father's fury, doing everything in his power to protect, to intercede, to find a way through the maze of committees and tribunals. There are other figures around them who turn the story's wheel. Madame Defarge, knitting by a wine shop in St. Antoine, her steady hands a narrow metronome for an expanding fury. She watches. She remembers. She records. When she makes a mark in her knitting, she keeps a registry, names to be found again, names that will be spoken of in a different key. Around her gather men and women who have been ground so small that they have become hard as stone. Some of them howl for justice. Some of them are both terrified and ecstatic to have the final power to strike back. On the day that everything turns, a stranger's letter arrives at Tellson S. Mr. Lorry reads it and hears his friend's name, and hears that dear Dr. Manette has interceded and that Charles is in prison. He organizes a journey, a plan to keep Lucie and the child safe if need be, and he arranges a departure under cover of night. But hours like glass will shatter without a sound. As Darnay is questioned, examined, and then by the dangerous arithmetic of power, condemned by a room that means to be the people's justice, events leap with feverish speed. The father who had once been helpless in a jailer's hold now is the one who stands before a tribunal not with swagger but with steady witness. He will tell precisely what happened in a country house all those years ago. The tribunal listens, the crowd roars, light and shadow fall across all faces. The doctor tells what he knows about a peasant boy and a savage little story revealed by a paper, and his voice is plain and unflinching. But the paper is not neutral. It is the record of a wrong and a family name tied to that wrong. In a city where accusation is itself a tool, where an angry public can demand immediate retribution, the tale is a trigger. Outside and around the courtroom, the city is a living thing, a tide of faces and a chorus of cries. Men who could not really tell you why they rage are commanded by the righteousness of the moment. Women knit, fingers flying, a stitch to mark a name, a stitch to fix a life in the list. The knitting is no domestic craft to them. It has become a ledger of fate. If the line of a name is knit, the life is marked. This is not symbolism alone. It is a grim, actual registry. In a world that has begun to use machines to shorten the distance between accusation and death, every private act of knitting, every gossip in the street, may be a fasten or a release. Madame Defarge sits at her post. Defarge himself, the wine shop owner, moves like a citizen with a secret. He will be on both sides of many doors. On the other side of the city, in the private rooms that still mean family and sanctuary, Lucie watches the prison wall. It is in her nature to wait. For hours on the pavement below a small locked window she waits in all weather. Her child sits her on her knee. Her father brings habits of health and the steadiness of the old study. Sometimes a woodcutter by the prison will joke, his face rough, his laugh harsh. He calls his saw the little guillotine. The city is cruelly absurd in that way. Jokes become the names of instruments of death. Lucie's waiting turns into small, faithful acts. A note, a request, a little bread, a small comfort passed through a chain of friends and aids. One man, a strange, idle-willed gentleman named Sydney Carton, will pass by these spots often. He is a man who has lived poorly and recklessly. He drinks too much. He lets the world see a languid indifference. Yet his face bears a certain melancholy, and that melancholy has a heart. Carton's place in the story becomes the fulcrum on which fate will tip. He is no hero in the conventional sense at the story's opening. He is not a man who announces himself. He does not take the stage with baton raised. He keeps his hand deep in his pocket and his eyes on the floor. But he watches, he listens. He is the kind of man who can conceal the weight he bears by a gesture of indifference. He arrives in a wine shop in St. Antoine under a foreign name and a borrowed accent. He sits with his hands in his pockets, like a man of no consequence, looking at the people as if he has nothing in him to be of use. He hears things that others miss. He overhears the pattern of a plot. He makes a plan. Carton's plan is not complicated to tell. Once you accept that people can be larger in their last act than they ever were in their first, he will stand where no one else could. He will be the man who gives up his own life for another. His gift is not the flashy, blazing self-sacrifice of melodrama. It is quiet, technical, exact. He will exchange places with Charles Darnay. He prepares for this as a professional would prepare for a theft, a confident thief of identity, clothing, manner, opportunity, timing. He learns every detail, every little idiosyncrasy. He watches the guards move. He knows the prisons. He waits for a narrow seam in the day when a few minutes of cover will be enough when a sleepy. Turnkey, the right bribe, a short, swift motion will be enough to change one man into another. There is a single, unbearable moment in which two lives intersect. The prison shirt off, a ribbon from a woman's hair, the swap of boots. A man laid in place who will, within an hour, go where no one returns to tell the tale. There are so many things in the story that cannot be softened. There are the tumbrils, the clatter of wheels, the crowds who hound one man and cheer another. There are the long, noisy lines to a scaffold and the quick fall of the blade. There is the thing that keeps men silent and makes them deaf at last to the whole weight of the world pressing down on them. There is the thing that dispatches a human life and calls it justice. And yet there are scenes in which the tormented soul is most fully human. The last note to a wife, written with a steadied hand in the early dawn, the doctor watching in the night until doom becomes a daylight certainty. The woman who meets a stranger and kisses him and says simply, "Thank you." These are the scenes in which the story is most tender. What follows the exchange is perhaps the most famous and terrible scene of the whole saga. Carton wears Darnay's clothes. He looks like him. He walks like him. He is stoic, and he waits. He gives Lucie the line that she will carry all her life, that the last and best act of a human being is to do what conscience makes right, not what one's own life demands. He tells her to be brave. He writes a short note to her that she will never read until she is at the quiet edge of her life. But he writes it into his own chest as if it is the only thing he keeps. Then he walks to the scaffold. When a person can stand and see the world and not say loud words, when he can perform the most public and honest deed there is, and not look back, that is the kind of quiet, humbling heroism that makes other men remember. Carton meets the executioner as if he were meeting a friend, and he walks to the block singing softly, a life he loved, a life he gives to let another live. He submits. He is not triumphant in a way the crowd will applaud. He gives himself away like a lantern taken down into the dark, so that some other life may go on and children may grow. That is the act which rewrites all the accounts. Out in the bright, slowly dawning light of a new day, the crowds are thin and the city will not be the same again. The tumbrils continue to roll. The noise of the workshops is only the undertone to an old narrative of survival. The story's last picture is a small human one, Lucie in a life that keeps going. The doctor at ease, not because the world is at ease, but because a way he had set in motion had been completed. Jarvis lorry back in his chambers, ledger open, business resumed as best we may. The great, dry, necessary world of commerce never quite stopping, even when nations are convulsed. The knitter's work lies quiet. The registry, for now, is closed. When our tale comes to an end, there is one line my voice will leave ringing in your ear. It is the one Sydney Carton spoke, the one he kept as his last, and that the story remembers as the brief, simple prayer and farewell of a man whose life had been wasted in small indulgences and redeemed at the last for another. It is a far, far better thing that I do than I have ever done. It is a far, far better rest that I go to than I have ever known. Hold that sentence in your mind for a moment. You have listened to a story that gathers people into its gravity. A father and a daughter, a faithful banker, a wise doctor, a young tutor who loved and fell short of the world's demands, a woman whose knitting scrawled the ledger of vengeance, and a man of slack virtue whose final choice became an act of luminous love. These are the people who moved through a time of terror. Each one is a small universe. Each one is the witness to what years can do to a human heart. And if you would remember just this for the rest of your day, that greatness can be quiet, and that courage may be a secret, and that the measure of a life is better seen at its end than at its starting point. The guillotine took heads and created martyrs and mourners. The real upheaval, the genuine revolution, is in the hearts of those who choose to act kindly and bravely when it is hardest. Sit with the image of a small hand held in a larger one before the falling blades. Let it stay with you. Let the world be better for the memory of it. Thank you for spending this hour with the tangled, aching, glorious story of our people and of two cities.